Hi, I'm Kate Mackay, Associate Film Curator here at the Berkeley Art Museum and Pacific Film Archive. We miss seeing you in our Barbara Osher Theater, but I'm delighted to welcome you to our live stream conversation and Q&A about Griff and Keelan Williams' illuminating documentary, Tell Them We Were Here. If you haven't already seen it, it's available to stream at BAMPFA.org, along with a wonderful array of watch from home options. You can also find information on visiting our newly reopened galleries since last weekend. You can come and visit BAMPFA on site. We are thrilled to be launching Tell Them We Were Here at BAMPFA. It's a movie that allows us an opportunity to spend time with 8 very different contemporary Bay Area artists, all who have exhibited, performed, and or represented in BAMPFA's collections, while exploring what has made and will hopefully continue to make Bay Area contemporary art scene so unique. We are extremely fortunate to have Griff and Keelan Williams, Nigel Poor, and Julia Rodrigues Widholm here with us today in the Zoomosphere to discuss the documentary. They'll speak for about 35 to 40 minutes, after which they'll have time to entertain your questions. But please feel free to type your questions into the YouTube chat at any time, and our moderator will pass them on to the guests. So just a few words of introduction before we proceed. Griff Williams, who co-made Tell Them We Were Here, is a painter, publisher, gallerist, and founder of Gallery 16 and the pioneering fine art printmaking workshop Urban Digital Color in San Francisco. Since 1993, the exhibition and publishing program has worked with hundreds of artists, and just to name a few, Lynn Hershman Leeson, William Kentridge, Deborah Oropallo, Bell Hooks, Rex Ray, and Paul Sietsema. Williams has also designed and published dozens of acclaimed books with Gallery 16 Editions imprint, and his paintings have been exhibited in galleries and museums, including the San Diego Museum of Art, the Crocker Art Museum in Sacramento, and the San Jose Museum of Art. Filmmaker Keelan Williams was born and raised in the Bay Area and is now based in Los Angeles. He graduated from Loyola Marymount School of Film and Television Production and has directed, produced, shot, and edited short films, documentaries, concert films, and music videos. His first short film, Everything Old is New Again, was an official selection at the Big Sky Documentary Film Festival and was nominated for Best Documentary at Film Outside the Frame. Tell Them We Were Here is his first feature-length documentary, and a big congratulations. It's a remarkable achievement. Nigel Poor is an artist and educator, and in 2019, as some of you may recall, BAMPFA exhibited the San Quentin Project, Nigel Poor and the Men of San Quentin Prison, which is an exhibition that grew out of the work she was doing with the Prison University Project, and which is also featured in Tell Them We Were Here. So if you've seen the film, you've seen Nigel speak about that project in the film. That award-winning, the award-winning work at San Quentin has been recognized by the Society for Professional Journalism and with a Blade of Grass Fellowship. Nigel Poor's work has been widely exhibited and is held in collections such as the Corcoran Gallery of Art, SF MoMA, the San Diego Museum of Art, and she is also a professor of photography at California State University in Sacramento. I'm especially grateful that BAMPFA's new director, Julie Rodrigues Widholm, agreed to moderate the conversation and Q&A today. Julie moved to the Bay Area to take the reins at BAMPFA last August, bringing a wealth of experience from her years at the Museum of Contemporary Art and the DePaul Museum in Chicago, and brings a perspective from beyond the Bay to this conversation that I've been looking forward to for some time. So I'll turn things over to Julie now, and thanks everyone for being here.
Thanks so much, Kate. It's my absolute pleasure to moderate this conversation and to meet Griff, Keelan, and Nigel this evening. And I look forward to meeting them and other artists featured in the documentary in person whenever it's possible. I have to say I was absolutely thrilled to learn about this documentary when I arrived last summer, because it was exactly the kind of stories and insight that I needed to begin learning about the Bay Area artists working here today. In some ways, the documentary felt like I was doing virtual studio visits at a time when I couldn't do any studio visits or really get to know the city during the pandemic. My natural inclination would absolutely be to arrive in a city and start to get to know it through the artists who are here and by doing as many studio visits as possible. So really, I appreciated the opportunity to begin to learn about our community here. I also want to mention that so often we engage with the objects, but not the makers behind objects and installations and ideas in museums and gallery spaces. And I think it's incredibly important to know the people behind the projects that bring the work to life in a really new and different and important way. So I'd like to thank Griff and Keelan for the gift of this documentary. And I'm thrilled to be able to ask them some questions and open it up to our audience as well. So I suppose I'll just begin at the beginning, which is what compelled you to make this film? And this is sort of a four-part one question. I'm curious about the title, who you were thinking about as the audience for this film, and how you chose the artist. But if we could begin with kind of what compelled you to make this film.
I think it was maybe a kind of reaction to the commercial art gallery that I've run for the last 28 years. You know, I feel like the problems that I was having with the commercial art scene and the kind of materialism that's inherent within it really needed a kind of antidote. And the gallery had turned 25. And,
amazing.
You know, rather than make a group show with all the past artists, you know, I decided to make a movie about the place that kind of inspired the work that was so meaningful to me. And you know, to be honest with you, it was also, I think, in some ways, watching much of what I was in love with about the Bay Area disappear. And wanting to, you know, stop time in a way, or I guess more specifically to highlight the things that I thought was best about the ethos that kept me here.
That's really interesting. Well, it's interesting to hear because one of my last questions is how have you seen things change since you first started the project? And it sounds like perhaps quite a bit.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, you know, I think San Francisco was a kind of anomaly in a way amongst American cities. I feel like, you know, it had the kind of, I think Natasha Bose at some point in the movie says that it was sort of, you know, it thought of itself as a province. You know, it had a kind of small town feel, but it also had this sort of international quality about it. There was this sort of multiculturalism that was so palpable here when I first came. You know, all the languages that were spoken and the sort of openness and the feelings that you could, you know, you could find your subculture here, right? You could find people that would support whatever it was that you were into. And I really felt like the higher prices and the sort of more emphasis on, you know, this sort of corporate allegiances, you know, the fact that so much of the tech industry has sort of moved here and priced people out. I think a lot with it has gone a lot of the eccentricities and things that I kind of fell in love with.
And can you tell us briefly about the title?
Keelan's got a different. Keelan thought we would never finish.
Yeah,
so I scratch it in the wall like an archaeologist might find it in 400 years. We thought about it from the standpoint of the fact that so much of what is known about the Bay Area artistic scene is always told through the lens of some other place. And we started thinking about all the films and documentaries and sort of, you know, the press that's garnered around artists, even major figures, you know, from the Bay Area are always sort of told through the lens of success in New York or success in LA or Berlin or somewhere. And And so we thought maybe this title was evocative of a kind of reminder that this exists. And, you know, maybe it's a little bit of like a message in a bottle for future art lovers.
And then how did you go about choosing the artists that you would feature?
Well, you know, having spent so long in the art scene, not just here, but around the country, there was some thought that this was going to be a kind of much broader view of what was going on amongst artists that I was interested in. Certainly sort of morphed into the thing that, you know, by default, we ended up having to edit and re-edit and re-edit. And I think we interviewed 60 artists.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
And through the process of interviewing them and discussing kind of similar questions to sort of gauge responses, and we could have done a feature-length movie, honestly, on all of the artists that we interviewed. And it never intended to be a sort of, you know, an all-encompassing document about what's going on in the Bay Area. It just happened to be a snapshot of people who not only were kind of woven together through this sort of community, but followed unique but similar kinds of civic-driven practices. So, you know, I mean, Keelan can attest to the fact that it's just the hardest thing in the world to cut a film like this, because you're cutting out all these stories that you feel so passionately about.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, when you ask, like, how did we choose the artists? It's cliche. I think a lot of them chose us when we started to sort of think about the themes of the film, because not all, you know, artists in the Bay Area are making things that we felt would fit the kind of ethos of the film that we were making. And I think that through the cutting process, you know, we realized that it was just going to be too daunting, and we really had to come with a fine-tooth comb over every single thing we were doing. And, you know, we just spent all the time that we had rewatching and re-editing and rewatching and re-editing in like a really painstaking way. And I'm really glad that, you know, the artists that we've included in the film, you know, all sewed together in the way that they did, because it would.
Well, they also had a really lovely sort of openness. You know, everybody was so willing. I mean, Nigel included. Like, everybody was just, you know, so open to the idea of having these stories told, and that's not true of everybody. Some studio practices are very private, you know, places, but we were really moved by the generosity of spirit amongst all these artists too. Yeah.
And you must have incredible footage that didn't make it into the film.
So much. Yeah. I mean, I really think in some ways it may end up becoming a kind of serial thing, you know, where we create a kind of series out of it.
That would be amazing.
There are probably, I don't know, what would you say, a half a dozen 15-minute bits that we've already established?
Yeah, I mean, we have, you know, 20-minute short films that are all but done. You know, kind of waiting to be seen. And, you know, I'm excited to try to get some of that stuff done. But I'm sitting in front of, you know, hard drives as far as I can see, just full of, you know, things that we didn't use, you know, that I wish we could have.
Yeah.
It's great to know that that footage exists, and it's important, and it will be important for future, you know, archival research, and to have that is incredibly important.
Well, and you know, when we were thinking about the kind of the film as an archive of sorts, Nigel's work and Sadie Barnett's work, and to that extent, I think Jim Goldberg's as well. I mean, maybe all of them in some ways. Lynn's got that cover too. I mean, there was this thing about, you know, the importance of you know, archives and storytelling, and being the one to sort of create those archives, because as Sadie says in the film, you know, if you don't, they don't exist, right? It's not like you can go to the library and see some of these things, right? So there is a sort of imperative in that way.
Can you talk a little bit about how you structured the film to tell the story of the individual artists and kind of create a cohesive thread among them? Yet also, I feel that you beautifully created a portrait of a place and a community.
Yeah, I mean, we spent a lot of time cutting individual stories sort of as we were filming them. You know, we would get home from an interview and we would just sort of immediately jump into the edit. And through that process, we ended up, you know, finding our own kind of circuitous route through the editing process, where we would basically have almost short films that were on their own kind of a thing. And then through the making of the film, as we moved along, we realized that some of them fit together better than others did. And that through, you know, giving it some time, allowing it to ruminate and ferment, sometimes, you know, you'd realize that there was some things in there that connected to other artists that you didn't realize connected.
Yeah.
And you would, you know, we would add certain elements and rewatch interviews and, you know, resculpt and rethink, and it started to become something that sort of felt a little bit more cohesive, but it was a struggle. You know, I'd be lying if I didn't say it was a struggle.
It was
really
very much of a reductive I mean, we started out making all of these short films for all these artists that we worked with, and then we basically tried to make a story out of them together. You know, like the Bay Area, the one thing about the Bay Area that I've always loved was just the close-knit fabric amongst people in the arts community. And it's true with the musicians and writers, and there's a real sort of spirit, I think, of commonality in this place, and I wanted that to come through in the film. And for certain cuts, you know, and certain artist practices, it didn't quite work. So we kind of arrived at the group that are ultimately in the movie as a function of kind of supporting that, you know, that ethos.
And what led you to Nigel's work in particular?
Well, I've known Nigel for a long time, yeah, and have followed her work for a long time, and have been very fascinated at the arc of that career. And in some ways, I felt like that the trajectory of her curiosities and her studio practice were interesting in that they've always been, I said this to her on the phone the other day, I felt like storytelling and sort of, you know, collecting stories has been a part of her work dating back to when I first met her. And this idea of the storytelling that she's now doing with Ear Hustle was a kind of evolution of a studio practice that's surprising and unexpected in you know, the trajectory for most studio artists don't end up in audio. Visual people don't end up on the radio. I don't know if you know this, but you know, it's like I thought, oh, that's also another kind of thing that the Bay Area, you know, when you're not under the lens of this harsh light of New York, you have the opportunity to kind of find your way, and that, I think, maybe is one of the, you know, the reasons why she says the hardest thing for her to leave would be the prison now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, much harder than leaving a studio. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And Nigel, what did it mean to you to be featured in this documentary and to be kind of put in this context?
Yeah, no, it's incredible. And Julie, you started by saying the film is a gift, and that really resonated with me when you said it, because being asked to be in it was a gift. Talking to them during the process and learning how it was going to unfold was a gift. Seeing it for the first time was also just like another gift. So it's something that keeps giving. And it was very emotional. When I finally saw it. It was great when we were doing the interviews, because I know them both really well, and it was just fun, and they asked great questions, and it was just like a relaxed experience. And so to see that translated into like a formal feature-length film was just really emotional. I mean, I cried at the end of it, you know, and I didn't cry for me. I cried for the experience of, you know, a father and a son working together to bring something so beautiful together. for all the work that people do in the Bay Area, for all the thought of different artists and how they're trying to make their communities better. And I found the beginning and the end with,
Cliff Hanks.
Cliff, walking up that hill was such a beautiful metaphor for every kind of creative endeavor that's out there. And and the title too, I never asked them why they called it that. So I was really dying to hear the answer. And I love that there's something elegiac about it, but I also like that it's saying like, we were here and we did this, and that we're still doing it. And that in future generations, we've just been part of that process of artists coming, after us. So the whole process was really a joy. And then the fact that my ear hustle partner, Earlonne Woods, got to be in it shortly after he got out of prison was just kind of icing on the cake, the creative cake.
I'd love to hear a little bit more about how you constructed the visual sequences for each artist, because there's so much really great source material and reference material. And did you get that through other archives or collections or from the artist materials? Where did all of that come from?
It's a real mixed bag, Julie. It was like, it was all of those things. And, I've always felt like I had a keen eye, and I had proof of my keen eye during this editing process, because we found this footage of Sadie Barnett's dad in AP footage, with him like briefly in view. And I thought, there's something that's meant to be like all of these stories that we're working on, when we find them, there's one thing about the archive that we all kind of know is important for kind of future generations, but it's also, only those that are interested in seeking that stuff out ever see it. There's lots of fantastic archives in institutions around the country that are, that are never opened, right? And once we started doing it, we were realizing, man, it's such a treasure trove. So we had more of that stuff than we could use. I mean, the Prellingers were, amazing. There's a deep resource here in the Bay Area for sure.
What a way to get a humble brag off there, Dad.
It wasn't humble.
Incredible. No,
humble.
And I was going to say not very humble, actually. But before, I jump in here, I just want to say to Nigel, I think, I've told her this before, but it was right after we did the interview. I think she gave one of the best interviews that we did. And it was evident to me immediately that she was going to be in the film, and that it was going to be this sort of glowing moment in the movie, because her energy is just, it's radiant, and you can feel it as soon as you walk in a room with her. Her smile lights the place up, and she just can answer any question as articulately as anybody ever. And you can just, saw an example of that a few minutes ago. But yeah, the archives, all the artists were really generous with allowing us access to their work and their archives, and even folks who, didn't end up in the film, on screen at least, did provide a lot of, archival material that we just, was crucial to making the movie look the way it did.
We asked a bunch of people also, people who provided color for the movie, people who had relationships with artists, folks that we were considering, we were doing interviews with. Eleanor Coppola is a good example. She gave us an incredible amount of remarkable material, not only of her work and the period of time in the 70s, but also that footage of the Dante Hotel with Lynn Hershman. It's just, it's cool. They're so remarkable. Cool.
And there's a strong narrative around building on the Bay Area's history of counterculture and activism. I'm curious, Nigel, how that has influenced your work, but also how that continues to be a thread, if it does, and what that looks like now for kind of younger generations of artists here in the Bay Area.
Yeah, I feel like I'm going to disappoint you with my answer. I'm sorry. I don't see myself as a political activist. I see myself as a storyteller. And it happens to be the stories that I'm working on happen to be very political now and are about prison. And I guess what I would say to that is I just found the Bay Area to be a free place to work, that you could go from one idea to another and not feel pigeonholed, that you had to stay within something. And I also really appreciate that I could do work now that people assume is political work. And I can say it's not and it's still okay. So what I would have to say about that is, again, really just the Bay Area being a free place to work, and that you can delve into these different impulses and experiment and see where it goes. So I'm sorry, I know that's not what that's from. You probably wish I could say something.
No, I have no wishes or expectations about how there are answers. You know,
I think that's a perfect answer in relationship to the context of this film, though. Like, I mean, you know, not everybody that comes out of the Bay Area is an activist, right? Yeah. Not everybody that comes out of it makes politically oriented work. It's just that there is something about the nature of the place that allows for experimentation, right? And almost encourages it, right? I mean, when we first started the gallery, every artist I knew had a band. Every artist I knew was in some performance of some other artist. You know, like there would be poets and writers and all these people that, you know, would kind of commingle. And you hear about that in other places as well, but it was palpable here. And so, you know, the freedom for a visual artist, one, you know, coming out of a photographic tradition, which is rather rigid, you know, that ends up in audio at San Quentin Prison, like that's a trajectory that, you know, you don't typically see. And I think it's this place that kind of affords that sort of opportunity. You know?
Yeah, could I add something to that? Because I think what I call myself a humanist, like that's where I see my work is about caring about humans. And I think the Bay Area allows that because there's connections between people, because it's smaller, because you can all these conversations, and you can be involved with other people, and together you can lift the group up to do something greater than an individual. I don't know if that happens in much larger cities. So there's a human quality to what I love about the Bay Area that I won't let go of, no matter how much it changes. Like, I'm always going to remember it's a place that welcomes people from my experience with the arts. Yeah.
You know,
I feel a parallel there with Chicago. I just have to mention, I think that kind of feeling outside of the center in some ways, affording freedom and experimentation. And there's such a strong history of social practice and community-based work in Chicago too, that has seemingly a different tenor of some sorts than what's happened here. But I am interested in how, also in both cities, I mean, Chicago's becoming less affordable too, although I would say compared to many cities across the US, it's still very affordable compared to here, but how the tenuousness of economic survival here and elsewhere, can the Bay Area sustain these community building social practices and groundbreaking innovation? Or is it because of that we have to have community building social practices? I'm curious.
I have to say, I'm glad you brought up Chicago, because I really, at the end of the day, and I said this to Keelan throughout the entire process, I really didn't want this thing to be so myopic about this particular place, right? There's a subtext, you know, of politics and community and empathy and sharing and learning that is true in places all around the world. Right. I mean, the bigger point I think that the film was attempting to touch on is that creativity changes communities for the better. Right. And we don't, you know, tourists don't come to San Francisco to go to the Google campus. Right. They come to see cultural life in the Bay Area. Right. We don't travel to Europe to see, you know, the way in which they accounted, right? We're seeing the great, you know, testaments to art and music, and this is the legacy of artists and musicians and writers that, you know, are important. And it's important to reiterate that in a time of kind of hyper capitalism around the world, these are kind of antidotes, right? These subcultures, these communities that ultimately are these lasting testaments to human value, right? They're the best things that humans do, is make art and music. And that's kind of what we were trying to get at. It happens to be here, but this isn't the only place that stuff happens.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And I loved seeing the interviews with so many people throughout the community. I thought that also was really wonderful to bring so many different voices and perspectives into the portrait. I sort of see this as a portrait of the community here at this moment. And I'm curious if you could maybe talk about the role BAMPFA has played in supporting artists in the Bay Area, and how we can continue to do so.
Yeah, it's no surprise that that we were eager to have you guys stream the film. The role, I mean, BAMPFA had an important impact on me personally as an artist. As soon as I got here, there was, these seminal exhibitions like Nayland Blake and Larry Rinder did an exhibition called In a Different Light, which I thought was groundbreaking.
Mm-hmm.
And for the community of artists that I was surrounding myself around, that had a huge impact. And the Matrix exhibitions and that program over the years, and Connie Llewellyn's work and Larry Rinder's work, we've always just been kind of in awe of this little engine that could, like, it was punching way above its weight. The BAMPFA has always had this remarkable program that, that brought these radical ideas to campus and by default to the rest of us. And so we encouraged some folks, including Larry and Apsara and others, to be on camera and kind of interview them around certain elements of the film, and they were terrific.
I wonder go ahead, Keelan.
The BAM is also like, in the first 3 minutes of the movie, it shows itself. It's by the rules of film, it would be almost a protagonist.
I think Keelan also had to cross by on his way to high school every day, so also had a different role in his.
Yeah, definitely. I was a curator for Screenagers, which is the film festival that a small school at Berkeley High puts on at the Pacific Film Archive. And so I've been in in different parts of my life. Have been in the various rooms at BAMPFA, and I just love that place so much. You have to do it
once a decade.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Wait, Griff, explain that. Do what once a decade? The Screenagers?
He was working with BAMPFA in high school, and then now.
Oh, got it. Yes, now.
The 10s and the 20s.
Yeah.
Or more frequently would be okay too. Yeah. We don't have to wait 10 years.
No. We'll wait until the 30s.
Okay. Nigel, I'd love to hear from your perspective as an artist who's worked with BAMPFA.
Oh, yeah. Well, going to exhibit, I moved here in 91, so going to exhibits there and enjoying the different architecture, then having the exhibit there, the San Quentin Project was, that was pretty much a dream come true to having seen many shows there, than to having my project in there. But what was really so beautiful about it was that because it was local, it allowed guys in San Quentin that had participated in the project that were now out of prison to come see the exhibit. And going with them as a group, it took a whole group of guys there, and we met and walked around the exhibit, and people talked about how they contributed. And that was astounding to them, to find their work in a museum and feel so proud of it, and to be able to talk about it, and for them to see other visitors walking around and looking at their work and taking it so seriously. So I feel so indebted to the museum for that experience, and for offering it to the men too who were part of it. Not all museums would do that.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
Yeah.
I encourage anyone in our audience who might have questions to please type them in the chat. We would love for this to be open up to everyone. This is an amazing opportunity to speak to the filmmakers and an artist in the film. Okay, so what did you learn about the art community in San Francisco that surprised you or you were not aware of?
Wow, I don't know. I mean, I'm constantly surprised by the nature of my business. The nature of the art gallery has always been one of, seeking out new, surprising, interesting things. And so it wasn't so much the film was doing that for me, but just being a participant, you know, in the community of artists here. You know, that's the thing about the art community, is that it's a living organism, right? It just keeps changing.
Are there misconceptions about the art community in San Francisco, in the Bay Area?
I don't know what I don't think there are conceptions about the art scene in San Francisco. Do people know there is one? I mean, maybe that's part of the movie. I think that, you know, the idea that it's so provincial. I mean, San Francisco, the artists here do choose a different route, and it seems odd, right? It just seems that, like, if everyone's following this sort of more careerist trajectory, why aren't you out here? And you know, there's good and bad reasons for that, but a lot of people choose to do it because it's not the only thing in their lives, right? It's one of the things that makes their decision about where they're going to live. I think Nigel has said this to me in the past too. You know, like, you know, this is a remarkable jewel. You know, geographically, it's a beautiful place. It has all these other reasons why people stay here. Not all of them have to do with a career in the arts. And so I think it's gotten labeled as being kind of provincial. I really don't think it's a very good description of what goes on here. Yeah. As I think is evidenced in the movie. I think, you know, all of the artists that are involved have had success outside the Bay Area. This isn't strictly about, you know, us kind of supporting one another. So, you know.
I feel like there, for me, you know, having been in Chicago for 23 years, there was certainly a narrative around a certain moment of the Bay Area's art history that was very visible, you know, funk and, you know, the second generation abstract expressionists in San Francisco, the Mission Street artists. And yet I have to say, when I came here, I didn't know that many artists who lived and worked here. And I know artists all over the country. I've done, you know, studio visits all over, but there was a bit of a mystery to me about who is here now, who is working and living here now. So I'm curious to start to dig into who is here now and what is the work being done and how can we support it. And also, as I've been here, realizing who has been here for so long and not even realizing, of course, I know these artists, I didn't know they were here. Yeah. I didn't know that they were based here. And that, I mean, I would say in terms of famous artists, if you will, there have been many, 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 many more famous artists in the Bay Area than Chicago. I mean, over time, and even just realizing, you know, who's passed through here, even just, you know, the fact that our vice president is from Berkeley. I mean, there's so many people have been here at some point in their lives. Yeah.
Some of that's like the legacy of these remarkable institutions, like the San Francisco Art Institute that's going through a remarkably difficult period. You know, just that school has had this insane roster of people associated with it, both teachers and students. And, you know, so I think having all of the cultural institutions, the art schools here, you know, SFAI and CCA and Mills and Berkeley, you know, I think that has fueled a lot of this ability for people to stay because they were able to be employed in various ways and, you know, find their way through the economic realities. But yeah, it's quite remarkable when you dig into it.
A quick aside about the misconceptions, and you mentioned the mission school. We had this idea that we would be talking about the mission school a little bit more in the film at a certain point, and you know, we asked a lot of people about that. And at one point, you know, Tommy Guerrero was like, isn't that just like an elementary school in the mission?
Yeah. Mission school. Yeah.
You know, it's supposedly it's a group of artists and nobody really knows, like everybody has this mythology around it, but it's not really a thing. And so, you know, we found it over and over. We were finding that.
But it's the self-deprecation.
It's definitely the self-deprecation, which is a part of what it makes up all of this stuff. You know, it's doing the work and it's committing yourself and it's making a life because you want to do this thing. You have to be doing this thing. And, you know, then making people laugh about it if you can, you know, because it's really not it's really not as important as other people make it seem in some ways.
And who are you hoping would watch this film? I mean, it wasn't an audience in mind.
Keelan and I talked a lot about the fact that I didn't want it to be an academic kind of treatise on, for the art community. I think that it's told in a way that, maybe it's a little bit akin to like me trying to explain it to my mom. Like I feel like one of the things the art world does extremely poorly is communicate these important ideas that fuel all of this stuff. I mean, that's really the only thing that matters, right? And we don't do a very good job of explaining it. And I don't think there's any interest in explaining it. I mean, the institutions have some, the schools have some, the commercial art world does not care about it because it doesn't advantage them, right? So we wanted to take a route that really explains it, because I think that the stories that are at the heart of this stuff are meaningful to everyone. I don't think that they have to do with your understanding of the art world. It doesn't have to do with how much you visit these institutions or how many art books you've read or whether you had art history in class. It doesn't matter. It's like we're trying to tell a kind of human interest stories about artists' practices and how impactful they can be in the communities that they live.
And for me, the title, suggests, tell them, right? When I'm thinking, well, who are they? It's basically anyone who wasn't paying attention right now, right?
Yeah, exactly that.
I mean, we were kind of torn about it. Sadie Barnett had this remarkably funny thing. She said to us in the studio, she's like, I go, well, who's the audience? Like, who are you talking to? And she's like, at a dinner party, if somebody comes late, she's like, you don't tell them everything they missed. They just show up and they get in the flow of it and you move on, right? That's the way there was one part of us that were like, yeah, screw it. If you don't know, you don't know. We're not going to catch you up. And then another part of us were like, no, we're trying to have a kind of more general audience for it. We want it to be told in a way that if somebody is so inclined to watch it, that they're going to be able to understand it, without this background knowledge. And I think we succeeded in that way. I think it talks to the average person in a way.
I totally agree with you. And I love that you said it. Did you say it was for your mom, that your mom would watch it? Yeah, I love that. And I felt that watching it, that it was incredibly accessible, without dumbing things down. It was just freaking interesting, right? To see all these practices. And I keep going back to thinking about artists as problem solvers. Really, that's what an artist is. They are a problem solver. And that's what comes across to me in the film with all the artists that they talk to. And I'm so glad you left out commercial gallery stuff. Thank you.
It was like I needed an anecdote, it was like my COVID shot before COVID. It was like, I've got to get some, you're right. Yeah, I had to,
Yeah.
As somebody that grew up in an art gallery, I was like, at no point has the best part of being the son of an art gallery owner been the business of the art gallery. When I was a little kid, seeing the work on the floor and the people talking and the conversation and the party and the music, that was what was so inspiring to me, and part of why I became a filmmaker in the first place. So, at no point was there going to be talk of the gallery world in this film or the museum world, because it didn't feel right.
But as you're saying that, Keelan, it dawns on me. I mean, I also don't want to come away from this feeling like commercial galleries are this remarkable engine that moves, the art world forward. I mean, it takes chances on young people. It spends real money to incubate these things. And it does it for free, right? I mean, this is a labor practice question. In some ways, like years ago in my gallery, Keelan painted a welcome mat on the floor. That's a permanent fixture. As you open the door, there's a little welcome mat that he painted. And we've been doing this stuff for free to the public to come in and see this stuff and decide whether you're for or against, you're with or you're not. you can view all these things in a way in the gallery world in a a very inclusive way. It seems alienating, and I don't know why it does to people, but they really are built by people who love what they do for the most of it. But the business of it can be kind of brutal.
And I was not paid for the making of the welcome out. So the labor question continues. It rolls on.
And I think these sorts of documentary films, kind of, Nigel, to your point about being humanist, it creates a point of entry for people into contemporary art, into ideas, where walking into an installation or walking into an exhibition has a very different exchange, and they can relate to the people making and thinking and creating in a way that I think is incredibly powerful. And I think video and film, and I love what Art 21 does. I mean, I just think it's so effective in building audiences, actually, and growing audiences and giving people a portal to this really intellectually rich, dynamic, experiential world and community through the people. Yeah, I think it's really important.
Yeah, I mean, every section of an artist in there made them and their work knowable, and still left mystery and still left it so there's more to learn. But you could come to it as someone who's had no experience in art and enter the conversation, and that's pretty amazing. Because I mean, the different work in there, there's such a variety of impulses, of visual impulses, and yet they were all welcoming. I think
it was also a kind of concern to, I mean, it wasn't exclusively true, because I think all of these artists in some form or another participate in the sort of commercial end of the art world by default, but so much of what they do is work that doesn't participate in that transaction.
I just have to say this.
Yes.
Sorry. I mean, the other thing that I think we have to acknowledge is this was a film made by two artists. And so they're speaking from within the experience, and they're bringing their sensitivity to it. And that's huge. It's, it's made by, friends. I'm not saying everyone is a friend in there, but it's made by like-minded people. And that's really special.
Thanks, Nigel.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So one of our viewers actually asked a question related to that. Griff, how does your experience as a painter influence you as a filmmaker?
I don't know how to answer that question. I don't know that it does necessarily. I mean, I think that creative impulses, it's like, whatever they are, it's a kind of problem to solve. I don't want to use the word solve. It's like it's a question, right? That you try to unpack, and you use the skills that you've developed or that you have innately, whatever those are, to solve it. I mean, one of the things that we were very conscious of, Keelan and I both, was to first do justice to the things that these amazing artists do, because it was important. The choices to have them involved was really about how remarkable their work is. And I was like, we can't blow this, right? We can't fail them, so there was a point. The artist in me was really conscious of maintaining the significance of that work. And so it's a funny balance, like Nigel was saying, like dumbing it down. We didn't want to do that too much, but we also wanted to be able to speak plainly. And so maybe there's a kind of directness to it that comes from having done this a little bit.
There was, however, a learning curve for my painting father, to realize that the work that's made with one's hand is immediate. You paint something and immediately if it's working or not, and you can work on it more and you can add things and try to move things around, whatever, but if it's working. And in filmmaking, it's a lot harder and more so like time consuming. The time it takes to know whether something's working is like infinitely more. So that was frustrating for him. I know I can answer that for him, because he was upset at multiple points.
The immediacy of it was definitely a problem. There was no, it was the, I could not believe how slow a process this is. If somebody says to you, hey, do you want to make a movie? Just say no.
Say no.
Do it.
Say no.
So you don't plan to make another feature film?
Actually, I'd kind of like to, but I need, a break. I need a little bit. I need a minute.
Not yet. And is that your work behind you, Griff? Or is that your
The
work behind
painting
you?
in the studio. Yeah, I'm in my
Okay.
studio.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, kind of following up on that, we have another question from the audience. What was it like to work together as father and son? You touched a little bit on it. What did you learn? What were some of the challenges during the process? It sounds like the time was a challenge.
That's for you, Kay. That's all.
I mean, it was, there's a lot of different adjectives I could use to describe working with my dad, some of which are nicer than others. But, I think really what it was like was it was a little bit like getting to know a new person. I was spending so much time with this guy who raised me, but in a lot of ways, the person that I have been working with for the last 4 years is not really the same guy that he was when I was a kid. And you go off to college and the person that you're leaving is your dad. And then sort of every other time you're kind of just like passing through for a minute, Christmas, Thanksgiving, the occasional trip. But I feel really lucky to have gotten an opportunity to get to know another person that, I would not have gotten to know otherwise. And in that way, it was a great gift,
It was a huge gift to me. And it was like, like I said before we started this, it was really one of the pleasures of my life to be able to sort of have this moment. Keelan grew up around artists and musicians and writers and poets. And he was running between people's legs at openings. That's probably when Nigel first met him. And
he was sleeping on the floor in a little basket, I swear.
So it's like a rite of passage in a way, but it was also a remarkable sort of backstop for me, because while he was part of it, he wasn't really part of it. He was aware of these things, and he could kind of check my sense of we all in the art world sort of expect that everybody knows what we're talking about. We talk in these codes and these the coded languages, and Keelan's like, I don't know what you're talking about. Like, we need to explain this in a way that's more that's clearer to don't assume anything. And I think that was a good takeaway.
And how long, start to finish, was the project?
We started, I think, in 2017.
July of 2017. So it's been a little while.
Yeah.
But we were
reminding me of that, Julie. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Gray hair springing.
Yeah. No, we were in the sound mix for this film, and we were talking to Mark Capel and Monty Valor, who are just super talented, and they were like, so how long have you been working on this movie? And Dad and I both looked at each other and kind of groaned, and we were like, oh, it's like almost 4 years now. And they were like, that's short?
Yeah, that made us feel pretty good.
Obviously in the heat of it, it feels a lot longer, but in the scope of documentary filmmaking, it's really, quite fast in some ways to make a movie. So it's a tough pill to swallow.
And Keelan, what kinds of films are you making? Are you working on? Can you tell us a little bit more about your work?
Yeah, I've been, I have a couple of short films in development right now. I'm working on making a film about the Harlem Globetrotters that I want to be animated. And so I'm, working on that. And there's a couple of little music videos that are kind of in production. And obviously I'm surrounded by just a community of filmmakers here in Los Angeles and the kind of alumni of Loyola Marymount University who are all making incredible work. And, I feel lucky to just be able to kind of be a part of that in any way that they'll allow me, and to facilitate the stories of friends of mine who are working. There's a film that we're working on right now. My really talented friend, David Fortune, is making a documentary film about this guy named Tommy the Clown, who started a dance studio and a really kind of vital arts organization in South Central LA that has uplifted a community, and he's done it by, you know, putting clown paint on and dancing at kids' birthday parties, and he's, you know, trying to make a difference in the lives of kids all over his community. And that film is really exciting, and, you know, doesn't have a title yet or anything, so, you know, stay tuned on that. But it's going to be a really amazing film when it's done. So I'm proud of the work he's been doing, and he's been allowing me to help him out with that.
Thank you. So Kate's curious about the music in the film.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little about the music?
It was really important that everybody that was participating, you know, in the film was local. I mean, we wanted the whole thing, the interviews, the sort of folks that weren't featured but were providing color. The score was done by a friend of mine, a remarkable composer named Mark Capel. You know, there's just this network of musicians and artists is really close knit in the Bay Area. And like I'm saying, you know, it was hard to extrapolate one from another. You know, you'd go to openings and some band would be playing, and one of those guys would be, you know, showing work in the gallery. So Tommy Guerrero, you know, it's hard to talk about the Bay Area over the last 25 years and not talk about Tommy's influence here to the creative community. There's a laundry list of folks: Kelly Stoltz, another sort of hero, Claire Rojas and Peggy Honeywell. Who am I forgetting? Is Sunny? You know, we've had so many people involved in this, contributing songs. Virgil Shaw. I mean, you know, yeah, there's just a whole list of really amazing Bay Area musical talent.
It sounds like the process of making it reflected the story you were telling in terms of community and collaboration.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
Do you have any advice for other filmmakers who want to make documentaries about living artists?
Well, I mean, you know, the important part is to find a way to understand what they're doing, you know, to really be a part of that process, because being sensitive to what they're doing is all about you being able to have a voice in the storytelling process. Like I'm saying, we don't always do a great job of that storytelling, and I feel like that all comes down to sort of the sort of understanding of what an artist is doing. You know, it's one thing to point a camera at the thing, and it's another thing to sort of eke out the meaning behind it. And so that's where the work is, really.
Nigel, I'm curious what your advice would. Oh, sorry, Keelan, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think it would definitely be to, you know, to be really focused about what it is that you are trying to do. You know, if you're trying to make a film about an artist's work, then you really should, you know, be around when they're making it, if they'll allow you, you know, because as my dad was saying, you know, to understand somebody's work, it's really easy to get distant from the process of making it, you know, and the thought process behind the work itself. And so, you know, getting to know it in that way is extremely important.
I mean, Nigel, that's exactly what you guys do, like on a routine basis. Like you're the one that should be answering that question.
Well, yeah, I mean, I was thinking, how do you do what, no matter what subject it is, you have to find someone who has a good story to tell, because a documentary about artists is not like going and looking at their work in a museum or a gallery or in a book. It's about the story that's being told. So you could have really wonderful art, but if there's not a story to go with it, it shouldn't, in my mind, then there's no reason to translate it to a film or to a podcast or a radio story. So you're looking for good storytellers. And I'm sure that had to play into the editing. I mean, I can say with Your Hustle, we've got great ideas, but if the person can't tell a story, it just doesn't work. So you have to have some way of assessing who can really tell, who can express themselves clearly in this medium, in film or in audio, whatever it is, because you have to honor the medium you're presenting in.
Yeah, for sure.
Right. And film asks for story.
Wonderful. Well, I would like to thank all of you and honor all of you as the artists who help us create meaning and find meaning in our lives and in the world today. And I think it's 7 o'clock, so we'll probably wrap it up. But thank you so much again for this incredible work, for this amazing conversation. Thank you.
I really appreciate it. Thanks, Nigel.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Bye, Nigel.
Bye.
I'd just like to hop in and thank Julie so much for her wonderful generosity moderating. It was great to get your perspective on this film, and it was really a pleasure listening to all of you. And I've watched the film a bunch of times thinking about it, and it really holds up to repeated watching. So if anyone out in the audience hasn't seen it yet, I really encourage you to have a look. BAMPFA.org, tell your friends. And it's just a wonderful portrait of a scene and of all the individual artists. So thanks very much.
Thanks, Kate. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kate.